Hello, Dr. Anders from Ford Chiropractic and Ford Bike Fit. Today I'm going to go through how I would set up a saddle and the anatomy behind setting up the right saddle. So be slightly technical. I'll try my best to explain it the best way I can. We'll go through some basic anatomy first, just so you can get an understanding of what we're talking about here. So this is your pelvis. This is from behind. This is the sacrum. These yellow bits are the spinal nerves coming out of your sacrum and out of your lumbar spine, and they feed into your leg. Super important for proper nerve function. And then you got your lumbar spine, and then your thoracic spine, and then your neck. Okay, we're going to focus on the pelvis today. So on both sides you have the SI joint, sacroiliac joints, right here. So this is the left one. This is the right one. This is your tailbone, okay? These little things here are your hips, both sides, and these are your sit bones, also called ischial tuberosity, okay? They feed into what's called the pubic symphysis at the front here. And then you have a few other elements that aren't as relevant for the bike cycling. So pelvis, pubic symphysis, ischial tuberosities on the side here. You have two of them: tailbone or coccyx, sacrum, SI joints, and lumbar spine. All right. They all should work in harmony to be as comfortable as possible when you're riding. So when you're cycling, you're engaging with the saddle at the ischial tuberosity, okay? The ischial tuberosity is also where the hamstrings attach. We'll get to that later, but your sit bones here engage with the saddle. So how that would look is, this is the saddle here, your sit bones engage like that. Okay, let me get that right. There, so like there. So the first element of a correctly set up saddle is the saddle width. Okay, so the width of the saddle is the distance between the widest part of the saddle. So you want to set the saddle up. Sorry, you want the right saddle that's going to suit the width of your pelvis. So you want to measure your sit bones, okay? So when you're sitting on the saddle, you want the right width so your sit bones aren't falling on the outside of the saddle, and you don't want the saddle to be, your sit bones to be too narrow, because that tend to rub on the outside of the thighs, and I've seen that it causes a lot of issues with the cycling shorts ripping up and causing friction and discomfort. So you want to find the right saddle that suits you. So the way we would measure your sit bones is by using something like this. This measures the width of your sit bones when you sit on it, and it will give me an indication of how many millimeters there is between your left and your right sit bone. When it comes to the type of bike and type of riding you're doing, will also dictate what kind of width saddle you need. So if you're looking for a leisure, comfort, cruising bike, your sit bones, your posture tend to be a bit more upright. As you get more aggressive, so you have a gravel bike, you might have a road bike, and then you have a triathlon TT bike. You rotate your pelvis forward. What that does, it brings your contact point with the saddle further forward to a narrower part. So that's why getting the right width saddle for your type of riding is essential. So if you're riding using a pub bike and riding for 2 minutes to the pub, you want a fairly wide saddle because you're sitting more upright and you want to contact the wider part of the saddle. If you're riding a triathlon TT bike, you want a slightly narrower saddle and you're going to be engaging a bit further forward on the saddle. So type of riding is also super important to get right. So when we measure your sit bones, in the clinic I factor those things in, what type of riding you're doing. So That's super important. And this here, this gives me a good indication of what type of width saddle you are. So this is a guide, but I find it to be fairly accurate with the width of the saddle, 145, 155. So that's the width of the saddle, and that's the so the second element of a correctly set up saddle is the angle of the saddle. So the angle of the saddle, the general rule is that you want it to be as neutral as possible. You want it to be horizontal without it causing pressure on the front of the saddle. Okay, we'll get to that part soon. So you want to set the saddle up to be neutral. This saddle here is the Bontrager Variola saddle. It's an awesome saddle. I use it myself. You want that to be set up. The way it's set up is it's minus 2 degrees from the top here to the bottom here. That's when it's neutral. So you don't want it to be completely flat like that, because it will point up too much in the front. So you set it up neutral. So the way this saddle is designed is that it has a bit of a dip to it. So you're sitting in the middle of the saddle, and it's super good for support. Gives you a nice stable surface to sit on, which is great for taking pressure off your hands and putting your legs, your muscles in the correct position for optimal performance. So you want to set this up to be neutral, let's say about there, okay? So when you're riding, and you're riding say a gravel bike or a road bike with a fairly aggressive setup, but not super aggressive compared to a triathlon bike, you want it to be neutral like this. And why that is important is because your sit bones, like I showed you before, are engaging with the saddle. And as you get more aggressive with the setup at the front, you rotate your pelvis forward, okay? If you rotate your pelvis forward too much, you'll start hitting your pubic symphysis, which is right here at the front of the saddle. And that gets really uncomfortable after a period of time. And a lot of you have probably experienced that. It's not very comfortable, especially after a couple of hours of riding. So the saddle angle, you want that to be horizontal because it gives you a flat, even surface to sit on, but you don't want it to be pressure on the front, so you want to tilt it just so it's just right. So the way it would look in practice is that you would start off by setting it neutral. In this case, this is minus 2 degrees, and you ride it and you try it on the drops and on the top of the handlebars, and then you find out if there is pressure here. It is normal, it's good, it's normal if you have no pressure when you're on the levers, on the hoods, but when you go into the drops, there's a slight gentle pressure on the front. That's good, that's normal. That means that the saddle is set up optimally for your pelvis. And as you ride more, you should expect that pressure at the front to reduce, and it shouldn't be a problem. You generally want to set your bike up so sitting in the drops should be slightly uncomfortable, and after 10-15 minutes you would like to sit up on the levers because that's more comfortable. If the drops are too comfortable, you should be able to drop your handlebars. Alright, so the drops are good for riding a bit faster, riding in a headwind, or when you're racing. You shouldn't be sitting there all day. So getting the right angle of the saddle is super important. So try it at home, try to set it up neutral, ride it, feel that pressure, tilt it down half a degree, and then try again. If it's still pressure, tilt it half a degree again until you find that sweet spot. You shouldn't, so it's minus 2 degrees at neutral, you shouldn't go any further than minus 4 degrees. Then you're starting to go too far and you're going to slide forward and cause pressure on the hands. If you're more than minus 4 degrees, you probably need a different saddle. this probably is not the right saddle for you. But there are so many different types of saddles, so it's really hard sometimes to find the exact one that suits you, but with a bit of trial and error, you should be able to do that. Another version, another type, this is also the Bontrager saddle. This is the Verse saddle. It is a little bit flatter. It still flares up a little bit on the back, but it's a lot flatter than the Aeolus. So this is a better option if you want a better, like an all-round saddle that you have the option to sit a little bit further forward without it causing too much pressure on the front of the saddle. But again, it's a personal preference. It's hard to give you a good recommendation based on without assessing you and testing you out and seeing what you need. So to summarize, what we've spoken about today is your anatomy in your pelvis and why that's important related to your saddle comfort, the saddle width, and the saddle tilt, and why that is important to set that up. The two other elements that are also important is the height of the saddle and also the fore and aft of the saddle. Those two elements are generally, you got to go through a whole bike fitting process for that to be relevant to talk about. And then the last thing I would like to talk about is the cutout in the middle and why that is important. So I would say last 5 years, maybe 10 years, as most saddles come with the cutout in the middle. And why that is that you take pressure off the perineum, so you take pressure off the middle here at the front. So sit bones, and then here is all soft tissue. So if you're sitting on too much pressure up here, it's going to be very uncomfortable, cause numbness, which probably a lot of you have experienced. So when you have the cutout like that, you want your sit bones to be nice and free. You want your sit bones to engage with the saddle, but you want everything in the middle to be off limits. So you shouldn't have any numbness or pressure on the front of the saddle. Let's see if we get a better angle here. This is probably the best one. There. See the cutout in the middle and how that clears the middle of the pelvis and why that's important. So if you're riding an old saddle that doesn't have a cutout, I would highly recommend you to consider swapping out your saddle for optimal comfort. So the general rule with saddles is that you should be stable, you should be comfortable. It might take a few weeks, months of riding for you to truly be comfortable in the saddle, and also you want to find the right saddle that suits your pelvis and your type of riding. So if you have any questions about setting up your saddle or what to do with the saddle, which one to get and all that, make sure you reach out. Happy to help you where I can.